the United States and Israel responsible for their death.
Thank you, Roseanne. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lazan. Thank you.
I know it's tough. And we're sending another message for President Trump. President Trump, you came with a promise of peace. You came with a promise to end wars and to make peace. And you want yourself to be called the peace president, and you want to get a Nobel Peace Prize. And you said you are going to end the legacy of the weak Biden and the weak Democratic administration. You promised us all peace. Please listen to our doctors, our nurses in Gaza. See the pictures of the babies, the children who are being crushed with the American 2000 bombs, the hospitals being attacked every day, the doctors, the nurses being killed or injured or abducted, the paramedics being assassinated in front of the whole world eyes. President Trump, you are a strong man. You have a lot of power. You can end this genocide, this mass slaughter with a phone call. Please do it. Thank you.
Razan, if you want to stay, you can stay with us. Or did you go?
I'm here. I'm gonna get going back to the
Yeah.
ER.
And we will move now to Iman. Thank you so much,
Stay
Habibti.
safe.
Take
Stay
care of
safe,
yourself.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.
yeah. Bye.
Bye. I will.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank you, Razan.
So
Okay.
we have now Mrs. Iman Rashid. She's a Palestinian American journalist and media specialist. She has a lot of experience about media training for advocacy groups. We are honored to have her here, she and her team, and she is going to talk about how we can be more effective as advocates for life, as advocates for peace, as healthcare workers who went to school to protect life, and how we can improve our skills in reaching out to media, and how we can make our message more effective. So thank you, man, for being with us. The floor is yours, and please take your time. Whatever you think you can share with us will be great. I'm sure we have future sessions too for more detailed and maybe hands-on training too. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Nidal. I would like to first start with a story of when I worked at CBS News. An editor that I worked with, and this is in 1994. I was just an intern at CBS News, and an editor found out I was Palestinian, and he took a big beta tape. These are huge. These are 3 times the size of a VHS tape, if any of you have any memories of VHS tapes, and twice as heavy. And when he found out I was Palestinian, he took this tape and he aimed and threw it at my face. It missed by just an inch. But I tell you that story because there is racism within the news media, within the mainstream news media. But also there were people who, when they found out I was Palestinian, were very kind, were very welcoming, were very warm, but they were also very afraid. They were very afraid because they thought that if they spoke up about Palestine, they would lose their jobs. They wouldn't be able to pay their bills. They couldn't feed their children. They couldn't pay their rent. So some of what we're encountering when we try to get stories across about Palestine is definitely racism. Some of it is fear from within the newsroom. And some of it, which is incredibly powerful and effective, is outside pressure on the news media. And when I say outside pressure, I want to give you one example, which is not an Israel example. It's an example from 1995. 1995, Connie Chung did an interview with Newt Gingrich's mother. This is at CBS News. And something transpired in the interview, and she aired it, and it made Newt Gingrich look bad. So what happened was the right wing decided to very quickly and very methodically organize thousands of callers who called CBS News and practically shut down CBS News. No calls could get through newsrooms. No calls could get through anything because they called and said, how dare you? How dare you air this negative story about Newt Gingrich? You guys are anti-Republican. You guys are anti-conservative. You guys are anti-Christian. You guys are anti this. The reason I bring this up is this is exactly what the right-wing pro-Israel side does. So it's not just that there's racism. It's not just that there's fear of telling the story and possibly being punished for it in the newsroom. It's also this extreme pressure that happens to the newsrooms where we will do a story will be aired on a station, and what happens after is that many calls come in to criticize the news station. The reason I bring this up is we need to be equally active on that front. We need to be equally active. It is not just being able to tell a story in the news media. It's to make sure that we have the backs of the news agencies that do these stories. So if for instance, I just want to give you guys an example. If you're listening right now, what Dr. Razan just said, if that were to air on, say, CBS News or ABC News or CNN or whatever it is, what would happen immediately after is the right-wing wackos, the racist Israeli groups would call the station and say, how dare you air this? This is anti-Semitic, this is anti-Israel, this is, all of the false accusations. And so when we do get these stories on the air, it is incumbent upon us, if we can, to organize groups in each of our cities, to watch these stations, and then to call the stations and give them either positive or negative feedback. This is really important. That's one of the most important things we can do. Secondly, I just want to say that many of you, I think most of the people here are healthcare workers. If you have had experience in Gaza, if you have visited Gaza, if you have done volunteer work in Gaza, it is crucial that you contact your local media, just your local media, and tell them that you would like to share your story about what you have done. If you have not contacted your local media or you're not sure how to approach them, please, I do want to put my information out there. Dr. Nidal has my information. He has my email address and my phone number. And what you would want to do is you would want to call them and tell them about some of what you experienced in Gaza so that they can tell the stories of the doctors who witnessed the genocide. I do want to tell you that the news media often will not use the word genocide, but even if they don't use the word genocide, it is still important that you tell your stories because there is saying the word genocide and then there is explaining genocide. And when you tell your stories about what you have experienced in Gaza, you are explaining what genocide is. When you say that you've witnessed child after child after child after child, a 6-month-old, an 8-month-old, a 1-year-old being killed, you are telling the story of a genocide. So it is really important that if you do not or have not done any media training, please contact me so that Dr. Nidal has my information. I do the training free. I just need to know, I would need to know your experiences. I would need to know when you were there. I would then help you contact your local media folks, and then we would make sure that you're able to tell your personal story. And one other thing I want to say is many times because of the fear in the newsrooms, the fear that I explained on 3 fronts, first, the racism, second, the fear of people in the newsroom being afraid of telling the story because they have seen what has happened to other people, other reporters who've told the story, and the fear of the pushback from outside of the news stations. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you don't speak, when you do speak, that you don't just speak in generalities, but you speak about your personal experiences in Gaza. The other thing I want to say is I've witnessed a lot of events being scheduled at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. I want to tell you from having worked in a newsroom that the best time to have an event is at 11 a.m. You must have your events at 11 a.m. The reason you do the event at 11 a.m. is because of the schedules in the newsrooms. There are morning schedules, there are evening shows, and usually the best time for you to tell your story or call them for a press conference or an event is at 11 a.m. It is not enough that the media shows up to cover our stories. It is crucial that we give them the time that they need to go back and write the story and edit the story. So if you decide that you want to have an event at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you might get a lot of media that shows up, but they will not necessarily cover it the way you want it covered. If you have it at 11 a.m., you are more likely to get your story covered with your own voice. And the other thing I want to say is if you, whenever you have an event, it is really crucial. Dr. Nadal and I talked about this yesterday. It is really crucial that you have allies present. We must have allies present. We are not an island. The fight in South Africa was not just fought by Black South Africans. It included Muslim allies, it included Jewish allies, it included allies from around the world. None of these fights can be fought alone. We must include, if there is if there is an organization like Jewish Voice for Peace or any of these groups, you want to invite them. And the reason I say this is because we know that often the media is afraid to feature our voices, but they will air. Dr. Nidal, you saw the piece that they aired the other day. They will air the voices of our Jewish allies. And, you know, we have to think ultimately, what is our goal? Is our goal to hear the sound of our voices, or is our goal to free Palestine? If our goal is to free Palestine, we must allow all these voices in, all our allies in, so that we have a better chance of airing our stories. If we shut out these voices and we say, well, we have to stop these allies from constantly centering themselves, which is, I hear this a lot. I hear this a lot. It is true that some allies, they're not perfect allies. But if we're going to wait for perfect, Palestine will never be free. Even if they are imperfect allies, we must include them in this in our events. And that means that if they talk a lot and they talk for a long time and you have an event, just say, hey, you have 45 seconds to speak. Just give them a limited amount of time and tell them what you'd like to talk about, and then cut them off when you need to cut them off. You can control the event. You can decide when it starts. You can decide when it ends. Another extremely important thing about speaking to the media, you never, ever, ever want to have a media event that goes longer than 30 minutes. Why? Because just like you have schedules and you have deadlines, they have schedules and they have deadlines. If you have an event that starts at 11 and it ends at 12:30, I'll tell you what will happen. The media will show up, and after about 40 minutes, they'll turn off their cameras and they'll go on their way, and they'll air what we call a voiceover soundbite. It's called a VOSOT. And that is when they say, today, Palestinians claimed blah, blah, blah. And then they'll take a soundbite from a doctor or from someone who was there. So that's what happens when you run out of time and you go past the 30 minutes. If, on the other hand, you limit it to 25 to 30 minutes tops, even if it means that someone does not get to speak. It is not about ego, it is about Palestine. If it means that you limit the time and you make it exactly 25 to 30 minutes, what ends up happening is they don't just do a quick voiceover. Do you know what happens? Something magical happens. What ends up happening is the media ends up doing what we call a package. A package is a longer piece where we get to speak for ourselves. It's usually about 1.5 to 2 minutes, and it includes the voices of Palestinians from our point of view. And that is only allowed to happen when you only speak and limit the time of your event to about 25 to 30 minutes, because that allows them to meet their deadlines. That allows them to go back to their newsroom, to write their script, to do their intros, to do their outs, to figure out where they want to do their live shot. But if you don't do that, if you allow people to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, what will happen is, yes, everyone will have felt better and it will be a very therapeutic event. But will it be an educational event? Absolutely not. We must view the media as an educational tool. And I'll give you an example of how powerful mainstream news is. Politicians will often dismiss social media because they say, well, it can't be verified and this and that. And, I don't think we should stop doing social media. I think we should go forward and go strong with social media. I believe social media has changed the world for the better, especially on Palestine. But when it comes to the policymakers, the politicians, they are influenced by mainstream news, and they associate mainstream news with power. When they do not hear our voices on mainstream news, they see us as a powerless constituency. It is crucial that we aim for not just social media and friendly media, like I love Democracy Now!, one of my favorite shows in the world. I love Al Jazeera. I love Chris Hedges. But we cannot just speak to our bubble. We must go outside of our bubble, and we must make sure that we include people that may not normally want to come and cover our events. And the way we do that is we stick to a schedule. We make it at 11 a.m. So sorry. We make it at 11 a.m. And then we also write a press release that is very press friendly. One of the worst things you can do is write a manifesto, right? We don't want to write a tome. We're not looking for a book. So I've seen the worst press releases on Palestine, which are the wordiest press releases. And you're tired. You're on like sentence number 4 and you still don't know what the theme is. Every single event must have a theme. It must have a theme. And not just a theme, but it must link to something that is considered newsworthy that day or that week. And I'll give you an example. One example is, Naftali Bennett, the war criminal, was visiting Princeton last Monday. And so, we can't just talk about the fact that there is an ongoing genocide. For the news media that is corporate, where they are concerned about, ratings and making sure that there's a hook or an angle to their story, if we know that that's what they need to air our stories, let's go ahead and give them their hooks. It's worth it. This is an investment we need to make in Palestine to get our stories out. So what we did is we used the fact that Naftali Bennett was coming to Princeton as the angle, as the hook. And we made sure that we had a powerful press conference, which had Palestinian voices, African American voices, Jewish voices, personal stories, doctor stories, and we limited it to 26 minutes. Each person was only allowed to speak a minute and a half, tops. 1 minute and a half. And I made sure that people only spoke for a minute and a half. If you go on and on and on, you go for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And I'll give you an example. And I told this to Dr. Nidal yesterday. There was a young woman who I spoke to from Gaza. We know that Israel is hunting. They hunt doctors. They hunt architects. They hunt lawyers. They hunt anyone who could possibly rebuild Gaza. They hunt Palestinians. We know that they hunt us like animals. We know that. So what happened, Haram, with this young woman is she told me the story of how her father, who was an amazing doctor in Gaza, was hunted. Every home he went to was bombed. So they were chasing him from house to house, this amazing elder of Gaza who taught thousands of doctors in Gaza. Every home. So they were clearly hunting him. And so she told the story to mainstream news. She told the story for a good long time. And at the very end of the story, this very powerful story and very sad story of a war crime, she said something at the end. She said, quote, "I feel helpless. And do you know what the news media did? They disregarded her entire story of how they hunted her father, and they just took these last few seconds where she said, I feel helpless. So when you speak to the media, every single breath should count. Every single statement you make should be a statement that you want millions of people to listen to. And I say millions because if you get on a local station, you might get 250,000 to 700,000 viewers. But if you get your story about Palestine on a national station, you might get anywhere from 2 million to 7 million viewers, which means that we are educating people who maybe, especially older folks who are not into social media, a lot of people who don't look at social media, but most importantly, the politicians who are bought and paid for by AIPAC, they notice what's happening in mainstream news and they respond to mainstream news. Because if our stories air on mainstream news, what happens often is the reporter calls that the politician says, Mr. Gottheimer, is it true that you refuse to meet with Palestinian families? Or, Senator Booker, is it true that you, whatever it is. But if you don't say it on mainstream news, they often don't respond because they disregard, and we know that the politicians do not respect us. They respect power. They are bought and paid for. They respect power. If we know that they associate mainstream media with power, we must make sure that our stories are not just on social media, but also on mainstream media. So what I would ask is every single one of you, if you can, please make sure that you form a group that is local, very local. Doctors, activists in the whether it's North Carolina or New York or wherever it is, you get together and you form. I think they did this in Dallas. It was quite brilliant, actually. And they formed an organization that is solely focused on Palestine, but it was legislative, it was mainstream media, it was local, and it was national. And if you have not done this yet in your city, in your town, please do it. And then make sure, please, that you call me and I will, free of charge, come and help you with your media efforts. I will help you put your voice on mainstream news. I want everyone to know a little bit about why I feel so strongly about this. So I am from a town in Palestine where I lived in Palestine for 3 years. I lived in Palestine for 3 years. In 1986, we found out, I went to school in Ramallah, and we found out that the Israelis were holding a human rights activist, a doctor. They were holding him in their prison, and this is when they still had a prison in Ramallah, and they were withholding his life-saving medication. They were withholding his life-saving medication, sentencing him to death, even though he was not accused of anything. And so we decided we're going to have an all-girls protest in front of this police station. We went, we held hands, we sang songs. We were kids. We were wearing uniforms. We were wearing schoolgirl uniforms. I was 16. My 15-year-old sister was there. My 14-year-old sister was there. And we were singing songs, holding hands. We were kids. We were very nonviolent. And we were suddenly surrounded by Israeli soldiers. And one of them, the commander, took his bullhorn and he stood right next to me and he said, Rawhu ya hayawanat, which if you don't know what that means, I don't know how many of you speak Arabic, it means go home, you animals. They've been calling us animals since they created this racist state. They've always called us animals. But I turned to the commander because I happened to be standing next to him and I said, we're not animals, we're people. Also, we're kids. We're kids. You can see we're wearing uniforms. And he just looked at me like I had two heads and he took his finger and he gave a signal. He gave a signal to all his soldiers. And Yaharam, out of the blue, even though we're children and very young children too, They took tear gas and they threw tear gas into our crowd. And our crowd also had some pregnant women who were there to supervise us and make sure we were safe. And I don't know if you know the effect of tear gas on a pregnant woman. But they knew there were pregnant women there. They had tear gas us. And as we ran, so that not to inhale the tear gas, because if you inhaled the tear gas and you fell to the ground, they would beat the hell out of you, accuse you of being a terrorist, and take you to jail, even though you're a child. And so we ran, and as we ran, they opened fire on us, and they shot my 14-year-old sister in the back twice. Do you know that not a single soldier has ever been held accountable? No one has ever gone to court. We cannot go to court because it's an Israeli judge. It's an Israeli everything. It's like living in the Jim Crow South, where we are not allowed to have equal rights. One thing I would urge you to do if you can, the reason I just told you that story is, for me, I'm 56 years old. This is something that, for many decades, I've been trying to work on Palestine. What we need more than anything, we have amazing doctors, we have amazing lawyers, we have an amazing community in the United States. But this is why Israel survives, because of the money that comes and the weapons that come from the United States. We absolutely need to have our voices in mainstream news. We absolutely need our voices in mainstream news. There is a new layer on top of all of this fear, on top of all of this racism, on top of all of this pressure from AIPAC and all these right-wing groups. There is now another layer of fear that the media has. And that fear comes from the Trump administration suing and threatening to sue the mainstream media, which means that many of them are afraid to say the obvious. They're afraid to say genocide. They're afraid to say occupation. They're afraid to say Israel bombed a hospital, which means that it's incumbent upon us to say the words that they can't say. That means that when we get on mainstream news, we have to make sure we can say the words that the reporters are too afraid to say. If a reporter says something about genocide, I can guarantee you that reporter will have major pushback, including threatening their job, including, threatening to demote them, including, just harassment. I knew one reporter once who played a message for me from this this incredibly racist pro-Israel right-wing guy who left her a message. It was a death threat. It was a death threat. So, she played it for me, and I couldn't believe it. All she had done was tell a story about a Palestinian family that had been harassed and didn't have access to basic things like they couldn't leave their home. They were locked in by Israeli soldiers and so on. So many times it's not that the reporters are racist. Many times it is that the reporters are afraid. And there is a very concerted and very organized effort to intimidate and harass the media into being very racist against Palestinians. So it is crucial that we organize our voices so that it is done on a hyper-local level, that you do this in your town, because what happens in the national news media is if they see stories coming from Dallas, if they see stories coming from New Jersey, if they see stories coming from Miami, if they see stories coming from Berkeley, if they see stories coming from Chicago, from Michigan, then they will take these stories and they will make them into a national story. But they often do not do national stories, and then unless they see a lot of local news stories that cover their local Palestinian voices. So I'd like to, if I can, there are many other things I want to say, but I would rather do them with smaller groups of doctors and healthcare workers and people who want to organize for Palestine, who are willing to do a training with a smaller group of people, so that we can practice how to put an event together, how to get the mainstream media to cover it, what time to do it, how to make sure that, one other very, 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 very crucial thing to say is, you can say the most impactful, the most powerful statement in the world, and they will not cover it if you do not have visuals. If you talk about a child that you witnessed in Gaza, but you do not have a picture of that child, they are less likely to do that story. It just cannot be graphic, because if it is extremely graphic, they are violating, I think, FCC standards. So if you have a picture or a video of a child whose hand you are holding and you've gotten permission, like I would say, if you go to Gaza, please videotape as much as you can. Please send out as much information as you can to the world, to all of us, so that we can repeat it and we can use it. But it is crucial that we have those videos so that when you have events where you invite mainstream media, it doesn't matter what you say. If you do not have powerful visuals, if you do not have a child smiling next to you, a child who you treated, a child who you were able to help, or a child who you were not able to help. But if you do not have those visuals, they may not tell that story. Even if it is NPR or other radio stations, they want to use descriptive language. So if you don't have video and you don't have photos, they will most often not air the story. But if you say, this is a child who I treated, he had to have his leg amputated, as long as you don't show something graphic, as long as you show the child after they have been treated, it is crucial that we show videos or photos so that they can then have a reason, an additional reason to tell your story. I would like to open it up to questions at this point, because there's so much that I told Dr. Nidal, normally my media training is a 2-hour training. It's a 2-hour training because it's a worthy investment for Palestine. I've been asked by people, can you make it shorter? I could make it shorter. Yes, I can definitely make it shorter. And for this, because I wanted so badly and I thought it was so crucial. And thank you, Dr. Karama, and thank you, Dr. Nadal, for making sure that Dr. Adazan's voice was heard today. It is crucial that we hear those voices, but we must invest in putting our voices in mainstream media. If you can, please contact me. I would be glad to do a training, which is like, I did one for Dallas healthcare workers. I did one for a group of folks who were protesting Elbit in South Carolina. I did one for a group of people in Chicago, for students, for SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine. I do cater my training to the particular groups. If it's healthcare workers, I'd like to know so that it can be specifically to the needs of healthcare workers. If it is student activists, it is slightly different because it depends on what their goal is. Is it someone who is racist visiting their campus? If it's healthcare workers, is it someone who recently came back from Gaza? If it's, if it's, for instance, protesters who are protesting a particular event, a racist event in New York or Chicago or wherever it is crucial that we know what the event is, because the news media often treats, if we continue to just say Palestine without giving them their hook, their angle, then they might not cover the event. And if we know that that's what they need to cover the event, it is important that we know how to cater to their mainstream news media hooks and angles so that they cover our stories and we are able to amplify the voices of Palestinians and people who went to Gaza. So if there is anything you would like to ask me, or I don't know, Dr. Nidal, if there's any way, or Dr. Karama, if you could put my information, specifically my email address, and anyone is welcome to email me and say, hey, we are planning an action on this date. We are planning to do, we're not sure what we want to do. We'd like to amplify the voices of these doctors in Berkeley or we are doing something, we are doing something in different cities, and I do go from city to city. So if you could just tell me what you know, whose voices are willing to speak out for Palestine, and we can go, you know, we can make sure that the event amplifies the voices of Palestinians or allies who want to tell the story and are willing to have an event where they're willing to do a media training first so that they know how to speak to the media and how to get the media to show up and how to get the media not to cut our statements and manipulate our statements, which they often do, and decontextualize our statements, which they often do.